Welcome to Electrolysis Unplugged, an after-hours chat beyond the probe. I'm Stephanie Shields.
And I'm Joanne Ganella. So today we're going to be diving into electrolysis. What is it? We're going to answer FAQs, and let's just share some fun facts about hair growth, just to keep things interesting.
So today's key talking points are going to be for the technicians looking to enhance their consultations and for clients that are curious about the process. FAQs and fun facts can be conversational starters during consultations or help address some common client concerns.
We want you guys to participate, so comment on our questions throughout the episode in the comments area, and we'll try to feature this on future discussions. Let's get to know some fun facts about hair and how unique that little hair generator really is. So thanks for tuning in.
Today's conversation, we were trying to think about some of the ways that you guys kind of come to us as newbies in the field or as established, but you might not have had like formal training, and talking about some of the understanding the process of electrolysis, the fun facts behind hair, the FAQs that clients might ask us so that you have a little bit more power behind you when you do your consultations and feel more confident talking about the science of it. Because I just told my students this today, sometimes we go a little too sciencey and then you get nothing from your client. And so we're trying to kind of bridge that space in there. So
and this is also hopefully an episode where even clients can end up listening in and, getting some stuff out of. So hopefully we kind of hit all our points here.
That's actually one of the things that's a great thought about that is that when clients potentially listen to this down the road, and I'm telling you guys right now, my friends are listening to the pod. They are very amused by listening to our hair removal industry. But I think that if you have a gem, as we're asking these questions, that you would want us to read out loud to other people that might be getting electrolysis or might be coming into it or whatever, drop them in the chat because we will share your gems too. It's not just our intellect, it's everyone's. So we all know that electrolysis has been around since the 1800s. It definitely has evolved into like the safest, most effective method for permanent hair removal. While it was approved by the FDA, we're working with our research project to get us back on the website so that we can continue to stay relevant, in the know, and showcase that we're permanent. We really are.
And there's definitely issues out there with having people understand just how effective and how irreplaceable electrolysis is. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but just this week, there was a nurse that was looking to get into electrolysis, right? So this was a post on Facebook. And her question was, is this still around or is this obsolete, right? And so for me, it just blows my mind because we're on the ground floor with this. So we know just how much in demand it is, how busy everybody is, right? So let's be clear, there is nothing that will replace, at least not yet, right? We don't know what's going to look like in 50, 100 years, but as of right now, electrolysis still is the gold standard when it comes to permanent hair removal.
I dream about waking up and like having some magic pill when I was still hairy, that I could just wake up and be completely hairless. I didn't even care about having the hair on my head and my eyebrows. I was
going to say, I was like, luck would have it. It would also make you bald. So
yeah.
Always all or nothing, right?
Absolutely.
So, there's no magic pill.
Talk about some of the tech behind this. Not everyone has had like formal training when it comes to electrolysis, which I think is a really beautiful, unique factor when we think about our mentorship hour is you get a chance to have two teachers talk to you guys about methods of hair removal within stuff that they like to do and then understanding the technology behind it. So we know that there are 3 methods, of electrolysis. And if we talk about adding one in there, when I say photothermolysis, that's another method of hair removal, but we can talk about that another moment. So we know galvanic is that direct current. It creates that pathway. It creates the lye within the follicle. It helps really get in there where you might have some distortion and whatnot. Then you have thermolysis, that's your alternating current, and that is that rapid friction, kind of heating up the molecules within there, and then cauterizing the interior. And then you have blend. And if you think about it this way, we know that heat intensifies chemical reaction. So The reason that blend can speed up the process of galvanic current is because we're adding in that thermolysis. So why would you say that the modality choice matters, Joanny? What kind of factors do you think about?
Well, normally, I think that the biggest one depends on the technician's preference and training.
Yes.
I think that that's the biggest determinator of why you're doing a certain modality over others. Beyond that, if you're trained in all three and you like to use all three, then we're discussing things like what type of hair are we dealing with? What is the client's sensitivity to treatment? And not just like pain, but sensitivity of their skin too, right? And then what area are we treating and what are the contraindications? So, which modality can actually be used over others?
I know that just the other day we talked about the importance of that health history as well, because some of those modalities, you really, I mean, actually, I shouldn't say some, all of three of those modalities, you really need to know what's happening internally that could impact that client, as well as topically. Clients kind of go rogue online, and we know how easy it is to get products from all over the world that might not have regulations that could potentially harm them during electrolysis treatments, especially anti-aging treatments. But there's a lot of medical procedures that somebody might encounter as well, and medical devices that are life-saving or life-changing that are all important to factor in. So don't ever think that that health history is unimportant. It always factors in.
Another thing to keep in mind too, and this is something that actually happened today at my salon, is that clients, are able to Google and do their own research. And so sometimes, this happens quite often, they might call your office looking for you to do a certain technique. And so if you're not trained or willing to do whatever it is that they request, there's also, well, this kind of can go two-way, right? There's an education moment as far as what you're letting clients dictate when they come into your office. But also, if there's no contraindication issue or, reason why you can't, let's say, do blend if that's what they're requesting, or straight galvanic if that's what they want to do, or whatever it is, then, there might be a missed opportunity too for a certain clientele.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I know that we've talked about this in the past, sometimes people will go online and they're like, they were trained in that one modality and they're like, it is the best modality. And I feel like it limits their ability to learn new things. Because if you only look inward at that one way of going about killing a hair, you leave a lot of people behind you. And sometimes it can actually really harm someone's uh, inspiration to find their happiness with the hair freedom that they can achieve with us. And so it's kind of important to understand that if you're like, oh, this is the only way, uh, what if it's not the way that they can afford it? If somebody can't afford electrolysis and you're like, waxing is the worst thing you'll ever do to yourself. Well, if that's all they can afford and that's all they can ever do, mind you, that's not necessarily always the case. It is something that you are now telling that person that what they're doing is horrible for them, when really what they're doing would be horrible for you on a treatment table, but has nothing to do with their day to day. If it makes their life happier, then they can continue doing it. If you are happier shaving your face in between, shave your face in between. But understand that that's going to kind of change the landscaping. One of the questions that we thought about having you guys answer in the chat was, what do you think the biggest misconception is about electrolysis? I know that some of the biggest ones when we talked earlier about it still exists is one big misconception, because it hasn't gone anywhere. And in fact, we are growing exponentially because of social media, of Google reviews. People are talking about us. Even if we don't have an internet footprint, trust you have an internet footprint because those people are online.
Right.
Do we have any?
So let's see. Oh yeah, that it's Melissa said that the pain is so bad, right? That is like the most excruciating thing that you can go through, that it doesn't work. Sure, and that's probably because somebody went once and they read somewhere that it's a one and done, right? That's a big misconception, the one and done thing.
Yeah. It's back to that magic pill of hair removal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely. There are so many ones. They've never even heard of it. Absolutely.
That's
That is
true.
a huge one. Some of that comes down to, are you willing to talk about your industry? If you're
Hmm.
not willing to talk about it with positivity and enthusiasm, then you are not going to bring people in the door. They do definitely confuse it with laser all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I even laugh because sometimes even in our own community, when they haven't had enough of that formal training, you'll hear them say things that don't jive to the same technologies, and you're like, "Hey, backtrack."
Yeah, that's not quite it. So we actually did some math too before we got started. So a couple fun facts about hair growth, right? So did you know that on your scalp, there is about 100,000 hair follicles just on your scalp? And each hair follicle will grow about 20 individual hairs in their lifetime or in your lifetime, not the hair's lifetimes. So that's a lot.
A lot of hair. Hair does. This is like one of my favorite ones. Hair does grow faster in summer because of the blood circulation. It increases with warmer weather, which it is interesting that I went from warm weather to cool weather, and I am seeing that my clients' patterns of growth don't match to what I was
Mm.
expecting. So,
Yep. Clients are going to be hairier in the summertime, which is a funny thing.
when they don't want to be. So when we think about hair growth cycles, we talk to our clients about like anagen, catagen, telogen, exogen should be in there as well sometimes in the conversation, especially when it's their first clearance and you're kind of finding that some of the hairs when you're extracting them definitely have a telogen look and other ones just kind of fall out. Those that exogen hairs that were never actually attached um, during your treatment, they are just waiting for the right shedding process to occur.
That's
So
right.
when we were talking before this about the different growth patterns across the body, including like vellus hair, accelerated vellus hair, terminal hair. So vellus being that peach fuzz, accelerated vellus, that longer fine hair, but it's the sun catchers. Okay. And terminal, the stuff that you think about all the time and you pet your chin over constantly.
Hmm.
When I was at an electrology conference a few years ago, and I have this digitized, I just don't have it for tonight. There is a really great insertion angles sheet that I show my students, and it does such a good job of kind of going in and introducing you to what the angle of insertion would be into the horizon of the skin. So when you think of like a protractor, right, and you have your horizon, is that the x-axis? One of those ones. You have your horizon, right? And then you think about your angle upwards. That's when I'm starting to talk about these degrees of angle. So certain areas of the body kind of standardize at like a 30 to 45 degree angle. The lateral sides of the lip are like 30 to 45 degree. As you move inwards, it gets more to a 60-degree angle from the horizon. And then in the middle, that's where you got those 90s, the ones that stick straight out in that area. Lower lips, the lower lip is usually 30 to 45 degree and 45 to 60 as you get to that center. But I will say that I do see a lot of people that have more of a 60 to 90 degree angle when the lip flips over. It seems to be a little bit more in line with that. So there is a bunch of different um, angles that you can kind of go through and get to know a little bit better.
This episode is sponsored by the Shields Foundation. Our mission is to make electrology education accessible by providing safe and affordable student housing and scholarships for the underserved communities. Together, we are building a future where every student has the resources to succeed. Join us in supporting tomorrow's electrologist at shieldsfoundation.com.
And then you have your variations of your hair follicles in which they produce different wave patterns, right? And then this is what I mean by like from 90 degrees to 60 to 45 to 30 to 10 is what we're discussing in that space. I think I might have a second half of this. I'm trying to move my
Oops,
screen.
if somebody's drawing, please stop.
Oh,
Um, so there was a cool chart that we were also looking at. So when we're looking at the protractor and we talk about, let's say, like leg hairs, for example, which is what students tend to start on. Let me see if that's on this chart here. But usually it's at about a 10 to 30 degree angle, depending on where it is. And so when you're setting up your pole boulder and doing an insertion, you're really looking at about a 30-degree from the skin angle. But if we're doing hairs that are just on the lip line, sometimes they're between 60 to 90 degrees. And so you're talking about hairs that are sticking pretty much straight up in the air. So our angle with our probe holder definitely changes when you're doing different parts of the body.
Which goes into like when you think about getting yourself set up for like a successful treatment, when you get yourself into position, if you already are aligning yourself out of the angles in which this grows, and if you think all your hair on your body kind of has like a, usually, unless there's a cowlick, a kind of the same pattern. If we think our body usually grows either into the center for protection of the center of the body or out from the center as it comes out to like the like lateral sides. And the same thing happens on your legs. Like you can kind of like, if you were to put water on your body, if you were hairy enough, you would see it naturally flow in those directions. And that tends to be the same direction. So if you went and worked opposite of that, then you're basically going to cause a little bit of chaos, trying to get yourself comfortable while you're working, which is a little bit rough. So that is, and this definitely can be something I can, I'll try to pull it up later at the end, but I don't know if I will be able to. I did see that.
You know what we can do, Stephanie, is we can put this in the, when I put up the recording, we can put it down underneath. So just go back into your course and then find the recording, and then you'll be able to see some of the images here that we're showing.
And that basically then that answers one of our chats. Like if I can email it, that I'm sure I could, but it'll just be in the re-record of this class.
Exactly.
Just a lot easier. So that's one big thing. Like when you think about, getting into those spaces, that your hairs have a predisposed way of coming out of the area. I think that it's also, when we were talking about this, eyebrows, that was a kind of a fun one. They renew themselves every 64 days of their life cycle. So like your eyebrows are fast in that growth.
And if you've ever overplucked, you know how long it takes for those to come back in.
Yeah.
Right. Mine are gold now. So if I lose one, sometimes there's a hole in my eyebrow and it takes a while before it comes back. So that's also important, because if you're changing somebody's shape of their eyebrows, and let's say you're telling them to let an area grow in, you have to let that grow in for at least 2 to 3 months before you decide that it's not going to grow in, or, it's not going to be a shape that they're going to be able to do, because it could take a long time for eyebrow hairs to grow in.
That's why that conversation comes up so much in gender affirming care for surgical prep. Because if you're asking me to work on you within that year before your surgery, that I don't even know what your last window is going to look like in that last 4 months of what your regrowth pattern. I'm only going off of like history of what I do in that time frame over anything else. So,
also in that same vein, I also feel like it's important to stop all hair removal. I usually do about 4 weeks, but in all honesty, I would like to do 6 to 8 weeks. And the main reason for that is because I want the hair to be able to grow in. And it takes a long time before you see some of these hairs resurface after they've been zapped. It's not, like a turnover, which we're talking misconceptions. That's another one. They think that the hair you treated today is the hair they see next week. That's a big one, right? So how long does it take for a hair that you treat to come back in reality? Right? And so here are some factors for you. So I went into the hair follicle, and let's say I did thermolysis, right? I tell clients it's like a mini 3rd-degree burn, let's say. So I went in and caused a lot of damage. Okay, so that damage has to repair itself. First of all, you have to clean up the space. Then you have to repair the tissue damage. Then you have to grow back the new structures, right? So let's say that the hair differentiation starts to happen. That matrix turns on. These little cells are starting to grow this new hair, but now it's not out of the skin just yet, right? So now the hair has to grow out of the skin to be visible for us to treat it again. So how long do you think that takes?
Well,
right?
Depending on the area of the body. I mean, when in my laser and electrolysis lecture that we did like last fall, it's now a home study, but one of the things that I talked about was that the diode score of all the timelines of hair. And really, they're only measuring your anagen and telogen cycles in there. They're not factoring in catagen or exogen spaces in there. And some of that stuff they couldn't even measure. And so when you start talking to a client, you have to think about what area that you're working with on top of other factors of their health history. When you and I were figuring out peach fuzz clients, because
Yeah.
you and I both love to work on peach fuzz, but it's all about expectation setting in that space. And so we did some fun math for
Yeah.
you guys so that you didn't have to. And I'm just going to be fully transparent. Joanne did the math.
Ooh.
And I supplied the research. Because
So we ended up finding an article and this was studies because they wanted to see about acne. So vellus hairs tend to trap a lot of sebum. And so the more vellus hairs, and you've done electrolysis for a while, you might have noticed this. The more vellus hair a client tends to have, especially in like zones that secrete a lot of sebum, the more acne they'll tend to have. So it traps sebum, you tend to break out. So like lots of little baby peach fuzz on the chest or the back, they'll tend to get more pimples in those areas. Face is the same thing. So you'll tend to see more breakouts, more oily skin when somebody has more vellus hair. So then came the question, how many vellus hairs does an average person have on their face? Because you get the client, right? That's like, I want to look like a hairless cat. I want to have nothing.
Yeah. Before we say these numbers, I want you guys in the chat to ask yourself as a technician, how many hairs the average person sheds daily, as well as how many hairs do you think are present in the face?
Yeah.
So those are the two.
Just put a guess because we had to look it up, but it's going to be fun to see, like, especially like those of us that have done quite a bit of vellus hair clearances, you know how much work it is. And this kind of also stemmed from a question that I received this past week from somebody who was just getting kind of demotivated because the client was getting frustrated. It just seemed like it was never ending, right? And that's the truth is it kind of is. So tell me what you think. How many hair follicles do you think that you actually have on your face? Vellus or not, both, whatever, all the above. And let's see how close you get to the actual numbers.
So I tell my peach fuzz clients, and I want you guys to think about this for a moment, that a lot of times when they want to go to that dolphin status, like just be like you can make their face squeak, right? We can't make a peach go into a nectarine, right? That's two different delicious types of fruit, but you can't make one become the other. Now, I can get that peach as bald as possible by scrubbing and removing and shaving off a lot of that fuzz, right? But I'm never going to make it look like the nectarine. And so it's important for people to understand that when you're measuring this, you have to think about how many centimeters squared is the area that you're working in, okay? And what that average looks like. We asked the Googles, the average square centimeter of your face is about 150 square centimeters of treatment space. Okay, obviously, different size humans have different size faces, but that's the average. And it was ranging honestly between 1 and 200. And so we just split the difference. Then Joanne was like, I found it. So how many hairs per centimeter squared? And
so there is 439 hairs per square centimeter that grows on the face. So then we were like, okay, like how big are people's faces, right? So we're not going to start measuring, but we found a number. And so that meant that, and I gave you a range from, let's say 250 to 300 square centimeter for face space. That means you would have between 65,850 to 97,800 hairs per square centimeter. So I wanted to translate this into how many hours of work does that mean? Because that's, okay, what 97,800 hairs? What is that, right? So I kind of picked a number. So I said, let's say we work, and I'll give you a range, 300 to 500 hairs an hour. Okay, that's our working speed. Well, that means that if you have 97,800 hairs, it will take you just one pass between 300 and I'll switch the numbers so it makes more sense. Between 195 hours to 326 hours of work.
First clearance.
First clearance. And that's peach fuzz. So these are actually pretty comparable numbers to full facial hair clearance, beards and that sort of thing, right? So when we quote beard clearances, this is kind of on par with that. I usually tell clients it might be peach fuzz and it might be small, but it is dense. And that's where you don't see that because it is small, right? And you think it's not that big of a deal. And for electrologists, you do an hour and it might not be as obvious. And then, clients are getting demotivated. But if they don't understand just how long it really takes to be able, like if you're trying to go dolphin vault, you're looking at, in the hundreds of hours. So
and
it's
that moment is all about cheerleading. Like that's and realistic. Like you have to tell them what to expect. And I would even go as far as to say, as a patient that is removing traditional terminal style beard growth for a full beard is going to find satisfaction in their hair removal faster than my patient that is going for peach fuzz, because your expectation reduce the expectation to zero. It's like, no. Your expectation for a beard is to get yourself to a point where you don't have to see a full beard. You want to have incidental hairs or nothing, right? But nothing to a person who had a beard is peach fuzz.
No.
And then you have to think further from there. So that's huge. When we were talking about these numbers, we were like, okay, well, the next question is like, people will ask, well, how long does electrolysis take? Right? So then we have to think about what's that going to look like. So on average, we talk to our patients saying 1.5 to 3 years. But there are factors that go into this. And we wanted to go over those factors with you guys because it is important to think about this. And we do have a consultation lecture that if you ever needed to go deep dive into this, by all means, feel free to get into our consultations because they are pretty extensive. But hair growth cycles. So we're talking, anagen phase dependency. So that's one of the bigger factors. Can we kill a hair in any stage of growth? Yes. But will we get more prime killing if all components of the hair we're trying to kill are at their best? Yes. So there's that. And then the cycle lengths. When I talked about those cycle lengths earlier, your chin on someone assigned male at birth, okay, where they have had substantial testosterone come in, they have a full upper lip and chin, that amount of growth that's in that area and how long it grows, you can have up to a year's worth in the anagen phase just in that space. If you had someone that was wanting to remove the remaining hairs on the top of their head, okay, that hair growth cycle is going to be longer, especially if you're working with someone who's had hair transplants, because it's still from their head. Okay, so we're still dealing with the same type of hair, but that hair is going to have a longer growth cycle than if you were working and doing a beard transplant in that space. So you have to start thinking about what areas that you're working in to give them that number.
Then usually when we're getting into also individual hair characteristics, so the density of hair, we just had a conversation about it. It might be vellus, it might be terminal, it might be something in between, but density plays a big role. So it does take a lot longer. Sometimes with vellus hairs, I'll tell clients, for example, they get the hint quickly, meaning that it's a once or twice, as far as the insertion goes. But we have density to think of. So it might only be once or twice per hair, but then we have, 100,000 hairs to kill. So let's get going. Coarseness is going to be another important factor. So if we're treating thicker, deeper hairs, it's going to take more time. And then hormonal influence. If hormones want the hairs to be there, we're fighting against the body's will to make that hair grow. So sometimes it means also the client needs to do their part and help to take care of whatever might be causing the hair growth to begin with.
Absolutely. Treatment consistency was a big one that we both really, that's huge. Missed appointments, clients who you sit in a consultation and they're like really eager and ready to do this, but they're just not able to to do the schedule that you ask them to do, or they can't financially afford it. That's one. Those frequency of those appointments. So how frequently you're having them come in. Are you matching it to the area that you're working, to the growth cycle patterns that will be there, so that you can maximize your kill per treatment of those hairs? Those both make a big impact in their treatment plans.
Sometimes these situations too can be really frustrating. We had a case like this past week where we have a client who only comes in once every 3 weeks for 45 minutes, but then was complaining that it was not going as fast as she was expecting. Truth is, she needs to come more often and she needs more time. The staff is not able to get through the whole area in that time frame. So it's difficult sometimes to be able to make client understand that when we're setting these treatment plans, it's not for us to make more money off of you, but it's actually to get you to your goal faster. So when clients are, dedicated, when clients are dedicated in the beginning, and they're doing what they're supposed to do, they actually end up saving money in all honesty.
Yes.
So size of the treatment area. Obviously, this kind of goes into it too. So the larger the area, the more hair there is, the more it takes time. I tell clients, I work hair by hair. So if you give me an area that has 10 hairs, it's gonna take me almost no time. If you give me a full legs to do, that's a different situation. My working speed is pretty much the same no matter what. There's obviously harder areas to get to. You work a little slower, but on average, let's say your working speed is the same. We're a technical skill where we insert inside the hair follicle and it's hair by hair. So we work on density, which is why we charge per fragment of time. And clearing versus maintenance would be another factor. So again, initial sessions are focused on clearing. The clients have to put aside the time required for you to be able to do that. Maintenance is where they can start to slack off a little bit.
Absolutely. When I think about clearing versus maintenance, I think of the staircase model and like getting to that control phase that you and I have discussed at length is, if I can't get you to the control phase, it's going to look a lot different in your timeline. And that's frustrating. I know this sounds like a silly one, but like health and lifestyle factors also can play a big role. So like hydration and skin health. If you have a client that is not following pre and post treatment care procedures, or they are just not interested in hydrating their body, they want to do anything that is like a diuretic and just like turn into a little raisin. Well, that is going against like not only their healing, but that's going against what I'm trying to do inside the follicle. If I'm doing galvanic and I'm trying to get lye to be formed, but I need more moisture in there. If I'm using thermolysis, I want that moisture in there so I can heat that up evenly. And so I also want it there for healing, right? Stress and hormones, when we talked about the hormonal factors, that's a huge one. While we are no longer cave people that are worried about a saber-toothed tiger, our body doesn't understand that. And so now that saber-toothed tiger was like, did I pay my bills? Or did I remember to get my oil changed? Or like, and that stress kind of builds and builds. Or it could be like you're not talking to somebody that you know, or you have a client interaction that was really poor and that kind of stuff. That stress does do something to your cortisol levels. Those cortisol levels love to play with your androgens, and that likes to create a hair. And so when you think about those little moments, you're basically feeding the beast that you're trying to break down. So hormones, whether it's PCOS or not, it all kind of plays into that space. Understanding that if we are unmanaged, and it might not be your fault, okay? When I say unmanaged, I do not mean that somebody, if anybody has like, I'm going to use PCOS because it's the most common, but if you don't have a doctor who is willing to figure out what is happening behind the scenes, you could be chasing growth longer. And we know what a hirsute pattern looks like, which is why, like, if you go onto my website, there's a PCOS link in there where it has like the Fairman-Galloway score. It has a lot of the tests that they can do. And they can basically hand their doctor all of the research that they did to be like, this is my behind the scenes, but they have to be very verbal about that. So that's a huge part. And medications. People do not realize there is a long list of not only androgen suppressing medications, but androgen increasing medications that can lead to for like more hair growth or disruptions in your hair growth patterns. So both of those are like factors I consider or all three of those are factors I consider.
Right. Then One way that I like to start consultations, and I feel like consultations need to be more of a conversation, sometimes between you and the customer, where you give them the information that they need in order to understand what they're getting into, but also you're extracting some very important information about their history. And so usually I'll start the consultation with a question that is like, all right, tell me about the story of your facial hair. Like, I want to know everything about it. So tell me the life story of what you've been doing to it from the time that it surged to what have you done to it and how often and for how long. And so that way we can kind of then delve a little bit more into things that are specific to them. So if they have a tweezing and waxing history, hair follicles may be distorted. That will make it harder for you to do your treatment, and it might actually increase the amount of times that you might have to zap the same follicle because the follicle is distorted. If they have a history of laser hair removal, I want to know how long ago it was done. And I usually will ask, how did it work out for you? I want to know the success because I'm seeing the end result. So I don't often know, what did it make it worse? Did it make it better? So did it work in some places and not in others? And so you want to dig a little bit more. So clients who've had laser treatments might have finer, lighter hairs left. And that might be a pretty quick way. It might have caused paradoxical hair growth, which would be a whole other situation to deal with. So we want to know what's going on, and that does change the treatment planning.
One of the questions that we got in the chat, I just think this is a good question in general. And I think that everybody should drop in like how often they ask. But how often do you ask clients if they have any medical updates? For me, I ask every session. And I'm more focused on if they are taking any medications that could be contraindication to electrolysis. However, I see a lot of people on a medical journey for electrolysis. I'm usually checking in with them at the start, even before I get to know how their day is going. I will say like, "Hey, how are you? Let's go into the space." And then I will like when they are seated, that's when I'm starting to ask that. But Joannie, what do you do in that way?
I probably don't ask every single time, but I would say that usually I'll have them do a new intake form when it's been a couple years or they haven't been to see me for a while. And then for the most part, it kind of comes into the conversation. So if there's anything, that I need to be aware of, hopefully it kind of gets dropped. But I can't say that I'm probably not as good. I think the fact that you work with, a medical director and all that in the medical office probably also helps to refresh your memory when it comes to that. With my
The chart has
patients,
to be there.
right? With my patients, because we do a reevaluation every 6 months, it's a little bit more scheduled. I feel like my cash clients that are not medical patients, it gets pushed off to the side a little bit because it is treated more as a cosmetic issue. But we know that there's a lot of medical overlap in this. And so you have to be a little bit more on it for sure.
I am going to drop in the chat a link to what like my chart looks like that we do after every service now that we're like heavily doing a lot of these medical cases. Now, what I'm going to say is if you get through this and you submit it, just know that you're probably going to drive my spouse crazy while he is sending these over to the medical director. So have fun filling it out, but don't hit submit, because he probably will not enjoy that. He's gonna be like, "Who is Sheila?" I didn't see that person on the schedule. So I'm going to be dropping that into the chat here shortly. The one I have on my computer is an app, like because I use the HIPAA jot form. But in a moment, you'll see that pop in there. The other thing that I talk to my clients a lot about is in the consult is that skin sensitivity and the tolerance. I worked on one of the models for the students today just because they aren't ready for that body part area yet. And so I was like, I'll take a client on because we have a quiet classroom for a couple more weeks. And this person was getting surgical prep and just chillaxing the whole time. Like not one, like there was nothing happen on their face. And they're like, how many people complain about this? And I was like, well, a good amount. It's a pretty uncomfortable area, but we try to find your tolerance, like no matter what. And they're like, oh, so are they just babies? And I was like, no, 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 no. It's just uncomfortable. Like when you're in an intimate area, it can be uncomfortable because you have these nerves that are meant to be like excited, be part of the process. And we're over here just like slamming them with current. And it could be really uncomfortable. And they're like, I like it. And I'm just like, how? Because I wasn't that person, right? So that's a big thing. I think about like the sensitivity of a client. So if someone's on estrogen, for example, estrogen softens the skin and it's kind of an anti-aging medication in the same sense. So if you have a patient that is on HRT, hormone replacement therapy, and they're on estrogen, know that their skin is going to get softer over time, which actually might increase like ingrown hairs as the hairs are changing. It might increase redness and irritation, especially when there's shifts in it. And it's just important to know those items. Testosterone, you're going to have sometimes clients get a little bit more sensitive when they're on testosterone. I think it's just a testosterone thing, but sometimes I see that as well. So that means their pain tolerance might change. Both are important to note.
Coming soon in 2026, the AES Spring and Summer Seminar, plus more virtual CEU events to keep you inspired, educated, and connected. Brought to you by Joanne Ganella and Stephanie Shields of the Electrology Education Coalition. Stay tuned and get all updates at electrologycoalition.com.
When we're talking about new hair growth during treatment, sometimes this is important to chat about with expectations as to hairs that might surge way after you're done with your treatment plan. So let's say you have your typical PCOS client that comes in with hormonal hair growth under the chin, and we talk about the treatment plan for the area and for the growth that I see in the present day, right? Now, I like to explain to them that because, we can treat what we see and what is visible, but because they have so many little peach fuzz hairs all over the face, and our project is not Project Dolphin, there is always a chance that these little vellus hairs could become stimulated later on in life, right? You have the hormones there, you have the sensitivity already, but I like to explain also that the hairs that become stimulated, and sometimes you have to kind of have them go back in time and remember the beginning of this issue that they've had with hair growth. And remember that when it started surging, it wasn't, I woke up one morning and there were 100 hairs under my chin. It was, I woke up and then a few hairs started getting a little darker and a little longer. And I started tweezing them. And then as I was already messing with it, it stimulated more hairs to grow like this. And then I started waxing and threading and doing other things. And so it was a gradual increase to be where they are today, sitting in my office, getting the treatments done. So we're reversing time, and I kind of make it go the other way. And that takes time. Just like the path to the office took time, the path to get them clear is also going to take time. But as long as they have vellus hairs in that area, there is the possibility that these dormant hair follicles will become stimulated later on. But again, it's not going to be 50 hairs overnight. And so if they start to see, now they know what it looks like and they understand what could happen. So their job in the future is, if they see some of these accelerated vellus hairs, right, these fine hairs that are just getting a little too long, a little bit darker, they need to make an appointment, do a 15-minute session where it's going to be super easy to get those hairs, and most likely they're not even going to come back after one session. And then I might see them once every couple of years for 15 to 30 minutes here and there just to clear new growth. So dormant hair follicles are always a possibility. Clients need to understand that, we're human, we're mammals, we're covered in hair. And so there's always going to be the possibility of new hairs. Now, I do believe that once we treat a hair, we treat it right, and we've waited the full hair growth cycle, which we know takes a long time, and there's been no resurgence, and let's say it's been a couple of years, then, you've treated what was there. But dormant hair follicles do exist, and things can be stimulated. Normal, natural hair growth patterns later on in life, things change. You go through menopause when you did your first electrolysis in your 20s or 30s, things will change, and that's normal too.
I mean, there's no way. We were just talking about this in class, I think yesterday, that because one of my clients was like, why do we have to have these cycles? And I said, well, because otherwise, one part of the year, everybody, if we all had our cycles like either synced up or in sync on ourselves, that person would be walking around like Chewbacca for a quarter of the year. Okay. And then the other half of the year, they would be as bald as the day is new. And they would be like Gandhi. They would have no hair on their body. And you have to think about our body cycles through to protect ourselves. And so that is an important part on this. There was a great question in the chat that said, does spironolactone stop androgen hormones? And I would say we need to be very specific about our wording here. It's not that it stops it, it's a blocker. So if the right balance of medication goes into the person that needs said medication, it can reduce the speed and amount of hairs in areas that were already problematic. That being said, facial hair is usually not impacted and to the point where it falls out like androgen blockers will do on the body, but it will slow down the rate of growth and it will dry out the hair a bit because it is a bit of a diuretic. On the body, if someone goes on to spironolactone and they're having a good amount of accelerated vellus approaching terminal growth, and their hormones have been stabilized for a couple years, you can see on their next cycle of growth that they'll have a sizable reduction. And as long as that medication is balanced out for them, they might not have increase of growth until they go off the medication. So it's one of those things like you have to start talking to the clients. I hate saying like definitive, like, does it stop? And it's like, don't say stop, but it can disrupt it. And that's probably the better way to say it. One of the other factors was about like practitioner skill and modality. If you think about your consultations, technique and experience, as you are out of school, the more you practice, the faster your setup of your insertion will get. That does not mean that you are doing a fast insertion. It means that you got to an easier access point so that you can line yourself up and move along faster. Treatment time is treatment time, right? But if you're on a back, you're going to get through the back faster than you are on the face. But if all your practice time when you're trying to get yourself up and going is on a back, and then you go to someone's face, by the time you're trying to be like that faster technician, you're going to see your speed go back down because you didn't practice on that area. So you have to like make sure that when you're in the in-between time between really opening yourself up and you're still practicing with your machine, getting your business up and going, make sure that the friends that you're putting on your table are the assortment of areas that you would want to be exceptional at. Modality used, when we talked about those modalities before, galvanic is slower than blend, and blend is slower than thermolysis, flash at least. And if we think about each one of those, they have a different purpose when we're using them. But if a client is more suited for one or enjoys one more, or you enjoy one more, you might get exceptionally quick at what you enjoy over anything else. I remember when the Apple's XL Pro and Pure came out, people were like listing numbers like 1,000 hairs per hour. And I was like, how are you doing 1,000 hairs per hour? Because I was a blend operator. And I didn't realize they were talking about like synchro and they were talking about a back. Like it was just like, brrr. So everything was lined up. And I'm like, well, that makes sense once you're there because you're doing flash thermolysis. Everything's in line. And I'm thinking like of all of like the genital regions and the underside of my chin in blend that I've been working on, I never could conceptualize that. Well, that does make a difference, but you don't always need the same modality and you might be better with one than another because it's what you were trained in, but always practice all of them because you want to be proficient in anything that comes your way.
There's a question here. So how long does it take for an electrologist to get up and running and feel confident? And then there was a follow-up at what should my clients expect at this time? Usually, I think it takes a good year. So you're kind of going to feel like you're drowning for the first 3 months. At 6 months, you'll be like, okay, I think I could do this. And then by a year in, I think that you've seen your own results. So you've now had a couple cases and you're seeing your own permanency in your clients. And that's going to be the point where you're like, okay, yeah, I can do this. This is good. So it does take time. I think that the first couple months are going to be the hardest. You just have to just keep at it, keep going. If you can start on friends, that's probably the best way to go about it. But you also have to be kind of critical of your own results. Every 3 months, you should be seeing changes in the treatment plans. You should be seeing reductions. You should be seeing that the areas are getting clear. So definitely have your self checks, but definitely I think that by the year mark, most people are at a pretty good point. And then after that, it's just going to be getting years of experience under your belt.
Completely agree. And I will say that like one of the person who asked the question, I don't want to like all of a sudden blast somebody, but like I think this is a really beautiful question to ask because it shows that you are in a space where you want to see improvement within yourself, but understand that your honesty in that question shows us that you're already moving towards that. And that is a big component. Your clients in the beginning are having to go off of the trust that you are instilling in the conversations that you have. If you are always transparent, if you were always like someone last week we had talked to one of our members about like how do I, because of the imposter syndrome stuff, like how do I feel good enough to charge people? And it's like you are a professional. You did the work to get yourself there.
Mm-hmm.
You can charge the rates that you're going to need to charge to keep yourself afloat in business, but always be honest about where you're at in that journey because somebody might not want to take that extra time to grow with you. And others are so desperate to have that hair removed that they're going to sign up 5 of their friends to get that hair removed during that year. It's just because they're so enthusiastic. But I would say, if you're not taking progress photos, I would make sure that you're charting very efficiently so that you can build trust in yourself too, because that's part of this is, you know, the science, you know how to talk to them about it, but you also need to have that boost of morale when you're coming around to that year mark, because if you're not seeing changes, that's when you go back and you're like, okay, I got to go back to like square one. Why is this not working? I've been at this 20 years. Today, I found a cord in the office when I went to go, practice with a different machine and get to know it. That wasn't functioning the way I wanted to. It was like warm, but it wasn't producing energy every time. And I was like, that's not supposed to be there. But I would never have known that if I was working on somebody else I would probably keep trying to adjust things, but I would not know that if I didn't go and look inwards if there's something off.
Mm-hmm. There was a comment here. I used to compare myself to my mother-in-law who has been doing this for 30 years. She probably was able to remove triple the amount that I could in the same amount of time. It took me time to catch up to her speed. I guess the point is also you did catch up. You know what I mean? Like everybody, you will eventually get there. I definitely think that you shouldn't force it or try to live up to where you're not at just at that moment. I think that the focus should be on doing a good job, not on working faster and cutting corners. I think that that's a mistake that new electrologists tend to make. You're going to be slower, and I think that's completely fine. And most clients, honestly, especially if they don't have anything to compare it to, won't know the difference.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this in a way that like we're cheating them in anything like that, but the blend operators don't remove as much hairs per hour as thermolysis operators. Does it mean that they're not doing as good of a job? No. And clients tend to get to the finish line just about the same amount of time. So it doesn't matter that much. I think that people, if your focus is not on your skill and your accuracy, then this is where it's a problem more than anything else. I don't think that it has anything to do with, I mean, speed is great and you'll get there is my whole point. But I don't know that it should be the focus. Don't be like, oh my God, I didn't remove enough, or this person removes twice the amount as me. It doesn't matter. Did you remove those hairs well? Was the root attached? Did it slide out? Because our goal is less regrowth, and that's what we're going for.
I mean, it's all about, when we think about like how to communicate with clients in these spaces, it's all about that early education, like highlight their progress, get to like know what it looked like before, and then literally cheerlead them to the next spot. You're seeing what they can't. It's like when people lose weight, you'll probably be the last one to notice that you've lost weight when everybody else is commenting on it. The same thing happens in this space. I'm going to be the first one to see that hair removal reduction. I'm looking at you in a 3.5x magnifying on a prismatic lens and mega lighting. I am going to see your results much differently than you, unless you are using a 10x mirror and like all of the lighting of a movie premiere. We're going to see it differently.
And I guess that kind of goes into the last topic too, which was client goals and expectations, which, perfections versus practicality. We're talking about managing expectations for clients and how much we can notice. Sometimes, for a client, they'll get even demotivated if they have 3 hairs left when they used to have 500 to start. And it blows my mind because they're like, why am I not done yet? And I'm like, are you kidding? There's 2 hairs. You had a full beard before.
And then for like a year.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, you're not, because there's 2 hairs left, it's almost like we did nothing. And it's like, okay, my bad, might as well just quit.
Like, well,
Time to retire. So it's a lot of repeating ourselves. This conversation, I think, never ends. Okay. And I've had so many clients where I've cleared so many areas and still they're like, I've been here forever. And it's like, you keep starting new areas. That's what happens. We start over every time. I like, why are you saying this to me? Because then I feel bad. But it's like, we've cleared your face. We've cleared your underarms. We've cleared all the peach fuzz off your stomach. We've done all this, this, and this. You just started your arms. Of course, it's taking forever. Yes, you're going to be here for much longer. You keep adding areas, right?
Yeah.
So multiple areas take time.
This is not the lamb chops sing-along song. The process does end. It's not the song that goes on and on, my friend. It does end. The only time it doesn't end, and even then it still does, is when you give me something new. And then we can keep singing the song. But that's because you're happy about the last part. And you got to remember that. I think that like some of the questions that we had, like we have little notes when we do this. We can definitely go like down the road further. But I think that one of the things that Joanna and I really wanted you guys to do in the community later on is share a success story, whether it be your own in your own electrolysis journey, because you're so new that you don't have one for a client yet, or one that you are very excited about. Make sure that you are not sharing patient details, but you can share the story as long as it's nondescript, so that you're not breaching anything. But I think it's important to remember that the clients who achieved their life-changing results and then emphasize the emotional impact on that, because it's like, that's what gives us hope for tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So, I think that's it.
All we have. Yeah. That's all we've got for today.
Thanks for tuning in to Electrolysis Unplugged. We hope today's conversation gave you something you can take straight back to your practice. Don't forget to share this episode with a colleague. And if you're part of our mentorship community, continue the conversation with us there. Until next time.